نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. In our previous lesson we learned about the first revelation, that how when the Prophet ﷺ, by the time that he was 40 years of age, he would spend a lot of time in the cave of Hira, away from his people. Why? Because he did not find any comfort, any happiness, any joy in doing what the people were doing. He was seeking something greater. And this happens with many people, that there comes a stage where you begin to question the practices of the people around you. And we see that the prophets of Allah went through this. If you look at Ibrahim a.s. also, as a young boy, what happened? He questioned his people, he questioned his father, that what are these idols that you worship? What are these idols that you have made yourself and you are constantly devoted to them? So we see that the prophets of Allah, they were upon the fitrah. They were upon the natural religion or the natural state that Allah has created people on. And what is that natural state? Inclination to belief in Allah alone, tawheed. And this is the reason why the prophets never found comfort in just imitating the people who were around them. So we see that the Prophet ﷺ, his discontent grew over time and he began spending more and more time in the cave of Hira. And what would he do over there? He would do ibadah. He would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How did he do that? Allahu a'lam. What was the method? We don't know. The Prophet ﷺ did not tell us about how he used to worship. But we do know that there were people who were still existing during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, who observed, who followed the teachings of Ibrahim a.s., Ismail a.s. Even though those teachings may have been modified, they may have mostly been forgotten, but whatever traces there were of the teachings of the religion of Ismail a.s., the people who were known as Hunafa, they adopted those teachings, they followed those teachings. So, what was the exact method of that worship? Allahu a'lam. But what did the Prophet ﷺ do in the cave? Kana yatahannath. As we learned that he would spend his time in devotion, in worship, in reflection. And then eventually the time came when the angel Jibreel appeared to him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, bringing him the first revelation, and we discussed how that first revelation was given to him. What was the Prophet ﷺ's reaction? He went home to his wife, Khadija radhiyallahu anha, and Khadija radhiyallahu anha, she is the one who comforted him that there is no way that this would be something evil. Why? Because this is the natural law of the universe, that if someone is good, then they deserve only good. And she had known the Prophet ﷺ since a long time. And she had witnessed that as she drew closer to him, she only got to know more and more good and positive things about him. Because you see, sometimes you know of a person from far, right, from a distance. And you hear about their good qualities. Or maybe you work with them once or twice. So you see that, okay, this is a good individual. They possess really good qualities. But what happens as you draw closer to them? What happens? You discover either more good things or sometimes bad things. Right? Like for instance, it happens with many people that before the marriage actually took place, the girl was in love with the guy and the guy was in love with the girl. But then what happened after the marriage? After a few months, he's like this, he's like this, he's like this. She's like this, she's like this, she's like this. Right? And this is because we're human beings. And we are faulty. But the prophets of Allah, alayhimus salam, they possess the most noble character. The best character. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how was his character? إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself says that indeed you are on the highest level of character. Your character is supreme. It is best. So Khadija radhiyallahu anha, she married the Prophet ﷺ. She lived with him. She had children with him. She knew him like no other person knew him. And what does she say about the character of the Prophet ﷺ? That there is no way something bad would happen to you. Because you maintain good ties of relationship. You take care of those who are needy. Those who are dependent, or those who need help, you carry their loads. You help other people. So there's no way that something bad would happen to you. And then we see that the Prophet ﷺ went to Waraqa bin Nawfal. Why? Because Khadija radhiallahu anha took him to Waraqa. And who was Waraqa? He was a person from Makkah. He was an Arab, but he had left idolatry and he had adopted some form of Christianity. Alright? He believed in the prophets of Allah. Because we see in his words the mention of Musa alayhi salam, and he has been described as someone who wrote the Torah, the Injil. So he was a man who possessed the knowledge of the scriptures of the people of the book. Alright? He was a knowledgeable man. And Waraqa, he is the one who, when he spoke to the Prophet ﷺ, he comforted him that what came to you was who? The angel. The same one who went to Musa. The same angel who went to the previous prophets is the one who had come to you, bringing revelation. Now we see that after a few days of this incident, Waraqa bin Nawfal died. But remember that Waraqa bin Nawfal, he was a believer. He was one of the first believers. Because his very statement that the same one came to you, the same Namus came to you, right, who came to Musa, and his words that if I should remain alive till the day when you will be turned out, then I would support you strongly. Right? What do these words show to us? Did Waraqa believe in the Prophet ﷺ or did he not believe in him? He believed in him. Right? So this is the reason why we must understand that Waraqa bin Nawfal was one of the first believers. In fact, in a hadith which is recorded in As-Silsilatu Sahiha, the Prophet ﷺ said, do not say bad about Waraqa. For indeed I saw for him a garden or two gardens. Meaning in Jannah. Alright? So do not say anything bad about him. Now, after this first revelation, what happened? There was no revelation for about 3 months, and according to other reports, 6 months. And during this time, the Prophet ﷺ went through an extremely difficult phase of his life. Because it was very painful for him, first of all, to have gone through this experience of receiving the revelation, and then the death of Waraqa, and then not knowing what's to happen next. What is going to happen? What's going on? You know, for instance, if you have a conversation with someone, a good conversation, and at the end of the conversation, you leave off with the feeling that we will connect soon. You know, I'll call you, or you call me, or you'll hear from me, or I'll hear from you. Right? But then what happens? You don't hear from that individual for 1 day, for 1 week, and then 2-3 weeks. What happens? Each passing day, your anxiety increases. Isn't that so? And the more important that matter is to discuss, the more anxious you become. And this is just us talking to another human being, right? And if that matter is not resolved, or if it's not further discussed, what's going to happen? It's no big deal. But the Prophet ﷺ, when he did not receive revelation for 3 months, and according to other reports, 6 months, this was extremely difficult upon him. Because remember, he did not know at that time what his responsibility was, who he was. All he knew was, اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم. That's all he knew. Is the word Nabi mentioned there? Is the word Rasul mentioned there? Has he been told you are a prophet of Allah? You are supposed to convey the message of Tawheed to the people? There is a slight introduction to Tawheed. Right? اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. Right? There's a slight mention over there. But there's no clarity in the sense that the Prophet ﷺ didn't exactly know what was going on. He had some idea that the message had come from Allah, and that being that appeared to me was an angel of Allah, but beyond that he didn't know. So this was extremely difficult upon him. And we learned that the Prophet ﷺ, he went back to the cave of Hira in order to spend more time over there in reflection, in the worship of Allah. And one day, on his return from the cave of Hira, what happened? The hadith in Bukhari, it tells us. The first book of Bukhari, which is the book of Wahi, the book of Revelation, I mentioned to you, the hadith that describes to us the first revelation. Right? And then the hadith after that tells us that the Prophet ﷺ said, while I was walking, all of a sudden, I heard a voice from the sky. So he heard a voice from the sky. And hearing voices was nothing strange for the Prophet ﷺ, because remember, even before prophethood, it would happen with him that he would be walking and he would hear someone greeting him. No one around him. The only thing that was nearby was a rock. And the Prophet ﷺ later said that I remember that rock that would greet me every time I passed by. But this voice that he heard from the sky at this occasion was very different, because it was coming from the sky. And for us, hearing something from above, okay, it's possible because we hear things on the loudspeakers, on microphones all the time, so it's no big deal. But for the Prophet ﷺ to hear something coming down from the sky, or hear a sound coming from the sky, it was itself frightening. The Prophet ﷺ said, I looked up and I saw the same angel who had visited me at the cave of Hira, sitting on a chair between the sky and the earth. So in other words, the entire horizon was covered with who? The angel Jibreel, covering the distance between the sky and the earth. The Prophet ﷺ said, I became frightened from him. And I came back home and I said, Zammiluni, dathiruni, cover me in blankets, wrap me in blankets. Because when you're in a state of fear, you also shiver. So the Prophet ﷺ said, wrap me, dathiruni. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the following verses of the Quran.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. يا أيها المدثر قم فأنذر وربك فكبر وثيابك فطهر والرجز فاهجر.
Surah Al-Muddathir. Ya ayyuhal muddathir. The angel came to him and he recited these verses to him, bringing the Prophet ﷺ the second revelation. Ya ayyuhal muddathir. O you who covers himself up. Because when the Prophet ﷺ came home, what did he say? Dathiruni, zammiluni, cover me. So he is addressed, O you who covers himself up with a garment. Meaning, why are you afraid? Get rid of this, get out of this comfort zone. There's no more time to remain under the covers. Get out, get up. Qum, arise, stand up. فَأَنذِرْ, and warn. It's as if he's being told, why are you resting? There's so much work to do. Why are you hiding? Go and do your work. And what is your work? Qum, get up, فَأَنذِرْ, and warn. Warn who? Mankind. وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ, and your Lord you should glorify. This is the message that you have to deliver to the people. That they should glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They should understand the greatness of their Lord. وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ, and your clothing you should purify. Meaning keep your body, keep your clothes clean. You see how important cleanliness is in our religion? In the second wahi, the Prophet ﷺ is told, keep your clothes clean. Do not let there be any filth on your clothing. And by filth, what is meant? Any kind of najasa, impurity, right? Any secretion from the body which is impure, don't let that be on your clothes. Or when you're outside and there may be some kind of impurity, if it falls on your clothes, keep your clothes clean. وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ. Cleanliness is half of faith. It's extremely necessary. Cleanliness is a requirement for ibadah. It's a condition, it's a prerequisite. For instance, if there is filth on a person's clothes and he's performing the salah knowing that there is filth on the clothes, is that prayer accepted? That because he hasn't met the prerequisites, right? Once we learned that the Prophet ﷺ was praying salah and he was wearing his shoes. And it's perfectly fine to wear shoes when you're praying. Alright? But the Prophet ﷺ, during his prayer, what happened? He removed his shoes. So the Sahaba, they were praying behind him, they also removed their shoes. So the Prophet ﷺ asked him after the prayer, why did you do that? They said, because we saw you doing it. So we thought maybe we're not allowed to wear shoes in salah anymore, so we took our shoes off. The Prophet ﷺ said, Jibreel came and told me that there was a little bit of filth on my shoes, and this is the reason why I had removed them. وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ. And remember that thiyab includes all that is worn, whether it's the hijab or the abaya or something else inside, whatever it may be, any clothing that we wear, let's make sure that it's clean. وَالرُّجْزَ فَهْجُرْ. And also remember that this tahara, this cleanliness, doesn't just apply to physical cleanliness, but also cleanliness at a deeper level, at an inner level, which is cleanliness of the heart, purity of the mind, as well as of faith in a person's belief, in a person's thinking. So, وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ. Clean your manners, your life, your clothing. Because your clothing is what is seen by people. Isn't it? What you wear on your body is seen by the people. So keep your clothes clean. Likewise, what else is seen by people? Our words, our behavior, right? So that must also be clean. Our lifestyle, that must also be clean. وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ وَالرُّجْزَ فَهْجُرْ. And uncleanliness, avoid it. Keep away from uncleanliness. So we see that on the one hand he's told, keep clean. And on the other hand he's told, keep away from uncleanliness. Now what is this uncleanliness? This has been generally interpreted as idolatry. Keep away from that. But it's not limited to that. Any kind of uncleanliness, whether it is uncleanliness in speech or in actions, in behavior, keep away from that. وَالرُّجْزَ فَهْجُرْ. So these 5 verses were the second revelation. And the hadith in Bukhari, it says that these 5 ayat were the verses that were revealed at this time. And after this, the revelation started coming strongly, frequently, and regularly. These are the words of the hadith. That after this, what happened? The wahi began coming regularly. Now I have a question for you. If you think about it, the first wahi and the second wahi, how much gap was there between the two? 3 to 6 months. And between the second and the third wahi, not much gap. Why? Because the words of the hadith that tell us, after this wahi, the wahi began coming regularly, strongly, frequently. So why do you think there was such a long gap between the first and the second revelation? Yes, so that the Prophet ﷺ could come to terms with what was happening. If you think about it, the first wahi, when he received it, was he frightened? The second revelation, when he received it, was he frightened? Yes. Think about it. Between the first 2 revelations was a gap of 3 to 6 months. Yet, he was so frightened when the next wahi came, right? Now imagine, if it came so frequently, after just 2 days, after 3 days, the Prophet ﷺ would not be able to handle it physically. He wouldn't be able to, even emotionally. You need time to accept certain things. You need time. You can't jump from one state to another. Sometimes the transition, when it's quick, it's easy. But other times, you need a break in the middle. Right? And also remember that if the wahi came immediately after the first revelation, and then the following wahi also came immediately after, in that state of fear, in that state of, anxiety almost, how could the Prophet ﷺ give the due haqq? Right? How could he? He needed to accept it, and he needed to deliver. The first revelation, what did that make him realize? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was sending a message to him. And if the next day he is told, go and tell people, قُمْ فَأَنذِرْ, could he do that? Could he do that? It would have been very difficult for him. So in order to give the due haqq of something, in order to do something properly, you need time. You need time. First, to understand yourself, to internalize yourself, and then, in order to deliver it properly, you need that time. For instance, they say there's no alternate to experience. Right? So for example, if a person says, I want to get my driver's license in just 1 week, is it possible? It's not possible. You take your first test, and then you take your second test, and then you have to wait for a year to take your following test. Why? You wonder, why can this process not happen within a month or two? Why such a long period? Because there is no alternate to experience. There just isn't. You need time. So the Prophet ﷺ was also given time. And this should make us understand something very important about seeking ilm. That when you're seeking knowledge, you need to dedicate time to it. Don't expect results in 1 hour, in 1 month. You struggle at the beginning, and it's perfectly fine. It's good. Because the harder it comes, the longer it takes to come, remember that the longer that knowledge will stay with you. There is a scholar, he said that the quicker knowledge comes to you, the quicker it leaves you. The faster it comes to you, the faster it leaves you. So for example, if you're doing memorization, hifz, and you are memorizing 2 pages a day, every day, 2 pages a day, you don't have time to review. Okay, within a month you say, I have memorized these many juz, good for you, but how much do you retain? How much do you still remember? Not much. So don't be frustrated with the fact that something is taking long. Learning a particular skill or particular ilm is taking longer than you thought it would. It's perfectly fine. Just yesterday I met somebody and they were telling me about their daughter, that how she's been trying to memorize the Quran for a very long time. And she said it's been years and it's only been 12 juz. And she said that she was discussing it with the teacher, and the teacher said, what's the rush? Why are you rushing? Why do you want to just complete the hifz and be over with it? The longer it takes, the better it is. Because she gets to spend more time reading the Quran, reciting the Quran, reviewing it. So, walillahi alhamd. Why rush? There's no need to rush. And this is what I have seen, that since the time I have known that girl, which has been about 4 or 5 years, I've known her to be always memorizing the Quran on the weekends or in the evenings. So even though it's only 12 juz so far, so what? At least every week, every weekend, the time has been spent with the Quran. And those 12 juz are so strong, mashallah, that you test her from anywhere, she knows it. Mashallah. So, patience and time. Very important for seeking ilm. And before giving up on anything, just tell yourself, let 3 or 6 months pass before I decide to continue or to leave. The Prophet ﷺ, it took him 3 to 6 months, right? For the revelation to finally come regularly. So we also need time. Because it's the matter of the heart. Right? Deen, or the knowledge of the Quran, where is it? It's in the heart. And the heart takes time to adjust. Right? So many women, what happens to them? They have a baby, but still they're finding it difficult to accept motherhood. Right? It takes a couple of months until they finally, it finally hits them that I'm supposed to be a mother. This is part of being a mother. So anyway, the Prophet ﷺ also, it took him a long time to accept this process of revelation, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is how He decided that it would take time for the wahi to begin coming consistently and regularly. Now, we see that in the first and the second revelation, Jibreel appeared to the Prophet ﷺ, meaning he appeared to him, the Prophet ﷺ, he saw him, and the Prophet ﷺ received the revelation from him. Now, this shows to us that sometimes the angel Jibreel would bring the revelation to the Prophet ﷺ in one way. Alright, and what was that? He would appear to him. And sometimes the wahi would be given to the Prophet ﷺ in a different way. In that the Prophet ﷺ would not see Jibreel, but he would only receive the words of the wahi. Alright? Ibn Qayyim has listed 7 different forms in which the revelation came to the Prophet ﷺ. Alright? And inshallah, we will learn about these details when you study the subject of ulumul Quran, the sciences of the Quran. So this is why I'm not going to go into the detail of wahi, how it was given to the Prophet ﷺ. Alright? But know that it came to him in different ways. Because variety is also helpful. Now, the Prophet ﷺ was told in the second revelation, Ya ayyuhal muddathir, qum fa'anzir. Get up and warn. So how did the Prophet ﷺ do inzar? How is it that he warned the people? We learn in a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, Atatni risalatun min rabbi. The message came to me from my Lord. فَضِقْتُ بِهَا ذَرْعًا. But I became worried. وَرَوَيْتُ أَنَّ النَّاسَ سَيُكَذِّبُونَنِي. And I became afraid that the people will deny me. فَقِيلَ لِي. So it was said to me, لَتَفْعَلَنَّ أَوْ لَيُفْعَلَنَّ بِكَ. You must do it, or you will be made to do it. In other words, you have no choice. You have to convey. This was made clear to the Prophet ﷺ from the beginning. قُمْ فَأَنذِرْ. You have to warn. You have to deliver. There is no walking away. There is no turning back. And this teaches us something very important. That sometimes when you start something, right, initially it may be easy, but then eventually it might get difficult, or you might feel like, I don't think I can handle this. This is too difficult. There's no way people are going to accept this. So what do you think? Let me do something different. Right? Let me stop this and let me do something else. But what do we see? The Prophet ﷺ, was he given a choice? Was he given a choice? No. He was not given a choice. And sometimes this is what we have to do with ourselves. Don't give yourself an option. Don't give yourself an option. Just tell yourself, I have to do it. Just get up and do it. I don't have an option. I don't have a choice. And when you mentally accept something, that this is something I have to do, then what happens? Then what happens? You can do it. Right? Because the first hurdle is the mental hurdle. That's the first hurdle. So once you accept, this is part of life. This is something I have to do. This is something that I don't have a choice about. This is a part of my life. I cannot walk away from this. Then you find the means. And you find the ability. And you accomplish your goals. And even though it is very difficult, but where there is a will, there is a way. Where there is a will, there is a way. I remember when I was doing the course, my group in charge was extremely strict. Okay? And what I mean by strict is that every single day, she would ask, did you do your lesson 7 times? And she wouldn't just ask the first 3 people. She would ask every single person in the group. Alright? And no was just not acceptable. If you said, no, I'm sorry, I couldn't do it, it was not acceptable. You had to give her a good reason for not being able to do it. And after groups, you could not go for your break. You had to sit there and complete your lesson. Alright? So she was extremely strict. And, we were hoping that maybe after 1 juz, after 2 juz, after 3 juz, she would stop asking, but she never stopped asking. She never stopped asking. And this is something that I think helped all of us do our lesson regularly. Because I remember those days when I would be like, I don't think I can do it today. Or I'm too tired today. I don't think I can do the lesson. But I remember at night, I'm sitting there with my juz. I have to do it 7 times because she's going to ask me and I cannot give her no for an answer. So just accepting this, that I have to do it 7 times, what happened? Made a way. Right? Found the time. Made the time. So acceptance. Making yourself accept something. Not giving yourself a choice. Not giving yourself an option. And there's so many things in life with regards to which we think in this way. I have to do it. For instance, for some people, for some women, it's about not leaving the house until everything is in order. Right? Or at least it used to be like that. Or at nighttime, not leaving any dishes in the sink. That's just how it is. So no matter how much my back is hurting or no matter how tired I am, I have to put the dishes away. I can't leave dirty dishes in the sink. Right? So even if your back is hurting, do you end up doing it? Yes. And after that, do you pity yourself? No, you don't. You don't pity yourself. In fact, you feel good. Right? You feel good. So this is how it is. There's some things that are important. So for example, when it comes to salah, do we have a choice? We don't have a choice. Right? When it comes to those matters which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made obligatory on us, we don't have a choice. So we have to do them. Then there are some other things which we have made obligatory on ourselves. How? By promising, by making a commitment, by signing a contract, for instance. Whatever it may be. For instance, a person is working somewhere and they make a contract. I'll be here 9 to 5. Right? Or I will get this much work done by the end of the week. I will dedicate these many hours for this work. Any role that you take on, there's some responsibilities that are on you. So those matters are also fard on you. Alright? So what does it mean? Accept it, and inshallah, you will make a way. You will make a way. Don't give yourself an option to not do it. Now we see that the Prophet ﷺ, when he received this message, قُمْ فَأَنذِرْ, what happened? He had to talk to the people. He had to convey the message to the people. And when he conveyed the message to the people, there were people who believed in him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So who are the first people who believed in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Who do you think was the first believer? Khadija radhiallahu anha. Right? Because her saying that Allah will never disgrace you was what? I believe in whatever happened. This has to be true. You're not lying. You're not making this up. And this is from Allah. So Khadija radhiallahu anha, she was the first person to accept Islam. And her honor, her status was so high that we learned that at one occasion, Khadija radhiallahu anha, she was coming to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, bringing him some food or something, and Jibreel came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam before her and said that Khadija is coming to you. Give her salam from Allah. Give her salam from Allah. And give her the good news that she has a home in Jannah. A beautiful home in Jannah. This was her status. And then we see that Waraqa bin Nawfal, he was also someone to accept Islam very early. The Prophet ﷺ said that I have seen two gardens for him in Jannah. Then we see that Abu Bakr radhiallahu anhu, one of the closest friends of Rasulullah ﷺ, he was also someone to accept Islam right at the beginning. There is a discussion amongst the scholars whether Abu Bakr was the first believer or Khadija was the first believer. So this matter is resolved by saying that Khadija was the first woman, Abu Bakr was the first man, alright? And Ali radhiallahu anhu, he was 8 years old at that time, he was the first child, alright? Now how come Ali radhiallahu anhu believed in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Because remember that he stayed in the house of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ali radhiallahu anhu was his cousin. He was a son of Abu Talib. And Abu Talib had raised the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But Abu Talib was also very poor. So when Ali was born, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam offered to take him under his care in order to relieve Abu Talib of the burden of the financial responsibility of taking care of another child. Then we see that Zayd bin Haritha, the freed slave of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was also one of the earliest believers. Abu Bakr radhiallahu anhu, when he accepted Islam, when he believed in the Prophet ﷺ, he did not stop there. We see that he approached his closest friends. He approached his closest friends. Now imagine, the Prophet ﷺ did da'wah to Abu Bakr, and Abu Bakr did da'wah to others. He carried on the light. So 4 people accepted Islam immediately at the hands of the Prophet ﷺ. And who were they? Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, radiyallahu anhu. It is said that he was only 16 years old at that time. He was a Qurayshi also. Then Uthman bin Affan radiyallahu anhu, Zubayr bin Awwam radiyallahu anhu, and Zubayr bin Awwam, who was he? He came to be known as the Hawari of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the helper, the disciple of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then also Abdul Rahman bin Auf radiyallahu anhu, and he was in his 30s at that time. So 4 people immediately became Muslim at the hand of Abu Bakr radhiallahu anhu in the beginning, right at the beginning. And these people, who were they? They were the Sabiqun. Who are Sabiqun? Those who are The first ones. The forerunners. Those who are ahead. We learned that in a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah sent me as a prophet to you people. But you said to me, you are telling a lie. Meaning, many people didn't believe in me. While Abu Bakr said, he has said the truth. Abu Bakr said, Muhammad ﷺ has spoken the truth. He is indeed a messenger. The Prophet ﷺ said, Abu Bakr consoled me personally. Meaning, he comforted me and also he supported me with his money. And then he said, won't you then give up harming my companion? Because at one occasion we learned, many years down the road, that there was a dispute amongst the companions, right, amongst the Sahaba. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was involved in that dispute. So the matter came to the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ was basically saying, stop bothering Abu Bakr. Stop arguing with him. Stop disputing with him. Because I presented Islam to so many people and everybody said to me, you're lying, you're lying. And Abu Bakr was the only one who said, you have spoken the truth. He believed in me without any hesitation. Immediately he believed. So he said, won't you stop bothering him? Won't you then give up harming my companion Abu Bakr? And it is said that after that, nobody ever harmed Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Ever. And this hadith is in Bukhari. In another narration we learn, the Prophet ﷺ said there was not a single person whom I presented Islam to except that he had doubt. Except for Abu Bakr. Meaning every person that I spoke to about Islam, they showed some hesitation. Except for Abu Bakr. He believed without any hesitation. Who was Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu? A close friend of the Prophet ﷺ. You see over here, the people who were closest to him in relationship, in friendship, they were the first ones to believe in him. Because his character was a testimony to his truthfulness, to his sidq. It was an evidence to his sidq. And this shows to us how important our character is when we're doing da'wah. You know, it happens many times that a person becomes serious in his deen and the family is not supportive. Right? So for instance, a girl wishes to wear hijab and the family is not supportive. Or a girl wishes to study the Quran or do some voluntary work and the family is not supportive. Why? Because they know that she's going to become extremely what? Nice and happy and cooperative? Or something else? Rebellious? Right? It's our character that matters. That matters a lot. And you may experience this personally also. That when your relationship with the people who are around you is good, you are exhibiting patience, tolerance, forgiveness, then what happens? Your work becomes easier also. But when we are impatient, when we are not on good terms with those who are closest to us, then what happens? So many hurdles come in our way. Because then sincerity is missing. Application is missing. Anyway, these people who believed, who were they primarily? They were from the Quraysh or they were of the elite. Alright? So for instance, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he was a Qurayshi. Uthman bin Affan, he was a Qurayshi. All the four companions who believed at the hands of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, they were all from the Quraysh. Right? Zayd bin Haritha, you could argue he was not from the Quraysh, but he was the freed slave of the Prophet ﷺ, his adopted son. So he even had a very high status. Ali radiallahu anhu, Khadija radiallahu anha, all of these people had a very high status. So the first ones to believe in him were who? Noble people. And then after them we see that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is the one who accepted Islam. Who was Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu? He was not a Qurayshi. He was a free person, but he was not a noble, in the sense that he was not from a very high class, social class. Alright? It is said that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was the 6th person to convert to Islam. Allahu A'lam. What exact number it was, but he was someone who accepted Islam very early. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ said, read Quran the way Ibn Mas'ud does. Why? Because from the very beginning, he was there with the Prophet ﷺ. a revelation would come, the Prophet ﷺ would recite and Ibn Mas'ud would memorize. So he was someone who knew the Qur'an, who knew how to recite it properly, and who also knew the meanings of the Qur'an. And Ibn Mas'ud said that 70 surahs of the Qur'an I have learned directly from the mouth of the Prophet ﷺ. 70 surahs. And 70 surahs is a big number. He heard directly from the mouth of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, after that, what happened? There were some people from amongst the slaves also who accepted Islam. Amongst them, Bilal radiallahu anhu, Khabbab bin Arat, Yasir, and his wife Sumayya, and their son Ammar radiallahu anhum. And remember that as the people were accepting Islam, alright, because the Prophet ﷺ would do da'wah to them at a personal level. Likewise, the Sahaba also, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, for instance, he also did da'wah at a personal level. Alright? Now, remember that when you believe, you have to do something. Correct? So, it wasn't just belief in the heart. That belief was also expressed through some action. And what was that action? Worship, ibadah. So we see that, وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ, and your Lord you should magnify, you should glorify. This also began. How? It is said that Surah Al-Fatiha was the third revelation. According to many Mufassirun, Surah Al-Fatiha was revealed twice. Once in Makkah and once in Medina. So when in Makkah, third revelation. And it was revealed another time when? In Medina. Again, it was revealed. So if it was brought to the Prophet ﷺ 2 times, even though he hadn't forgotten it, what does that show? The importance of Surah Al-Fatiha. Alright? And we see that Jibreel taught the Prophet ﷺ wudu and salah. وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ وَالرُّجْزَ فَهْجُرْ. So Jibreel came to the Prophet ﷺ, taught him how to pray. And this is reported in Musnad Ahmad. And at the beginning, salah was only 2 units of prayer. And this is from a hadith which is in As-Silsilatu Sahiha. And every person who embraced Islam, one of the first things the Prophet ﷺ would teach them was salah, how to pray. Or he would tell one of the companions to teach them how to pray. And this is also reported in a hadith in As-Silsilatu Sahiha. So we see that from the very beginning, what were the believers doing? Performing salah. In the Qur'an also, as you open it up, as you read Surah Al-Baqarah, what do you learn? Who are the people who benefit from the Qur'an? الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةِ. The first action that is mentioned is salah. Now remember that at this time, salah was not obligatory as it is right now. 5 times a day, certain units of prayer, certain rak'at. No, it was not obligatory in this way. It was, meaning it was something that the believers had to do. And it is said that once at the beginning of the day and once at the end of the day, so only 2 prayers. But even that was not fard. If you were able to do it, you would do it. And if you couldn't do it, no big deal. You understand? It was not fard in that way. Why? Because the believers were hiding their faith at this time. If they would pray, if they would excuse themselves from a gathering in order to pray their salah, you think that would be okay? It would bring them a lot of attention, and also they would have to face a lot of hostility from their people. Right? So it was something they had to do, but it was not obligatory the way it is obligatory now. Now we learned that the first 3 years, the Prophet ﷺ, he did private da'wah. And the Sahaba also did private da'wah. What does it mean? That they just spoke to someone about Islam, someone whom they thought would accept Islam. You see, you come across different types of people. Some people, they're very open-minded. They're very open to change. Right? They're seeking something better. They're always seeking improvement. And then there's other people who are very firm on their old age practices. Right? They think what they've been doing for the past 5 years, for the past 10 years is written in stone and you cannot change it, you cannot alter it, you cannot leave it. Right? So there's different types of people. So any person from whom it was expected that yes, this person might accept Islam, what would the Prophet ﷺ do? He would take Islam to them. He would present Islam to them. So da'wah was how? It was private. Not secret in the sense that Muslims were hiding their faith, but it was private. Religion was a private matter. Islam, belief in Tawheed was a private matter. Right? And in a hadith we learn that once a man came to the Prophet ﷺ right at the beginning. Beginning as in when the wahi came to the Prophet ﷺ. And he came and he asked the Prophet ﷺ, who are you? He said, I'm a prophet. So he said, what is a prophet? He said, Allah has sent me with a message. That man said, with what has he sent you? The Prophet ﷺ said, he sent me to strengthen the ties of kinship, to destroy idols so that Allah alone should be worshipped and nothing should be associated with Him. That man said, who has followed you in this? The Prophet ﷺ said, a free man and a slave. Meaning only 2 people so far. Why is it the Prophet ﷺ said a free man and a slave? Because this was right at the beginning. Children, the Prophet ﷺ was not including in this. Alright? Likewise, people from various backgrounds, the Prophet ﷺ is not including in this. He said a free man referring to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and a slave referring to Bilal radiallahu anhu. Meaning very few people. Very few people have believed in me so far. So what does it show? This man came at the very beginning. So that man, he said, I will follow you. I will follow you. The Prophet ﷺ said, you cannot do that now. Do you not see my situation and that of the people? Go back home, because this man had come from somewhere else. He was not from the people of Makkah. He said, go to your people, and when you hear that my cause has prevailed, then come to me. So the Prophet ﷺ, he did da'wah how? Privately, not publicly. Privately. Because if that man accepted Islam, what would that create? Unnecessary attention. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ's focus was that as many people as we can, we should help them convert to Islam. As the numbers grow, then we can go out in the public. You understand? So this man, he returned, and then when the Prophet ﷺ did hijrah, then this man came to Medina, and he said, O Messenger of Allah, do you recognize me? The Prophet ﷺ said, yes, you are the one who met me in Makkah. So that man said, أخبرني عما علمك الله وأجهله. Tell me about what Allah has taught you, and I have remained ignorant of. So teach me. And the Prophet ﷺ then taught him about salah. Now, does this mean the Prophet ﷺ did not let him accept Islam? He said, no, you stay a disbeliever. No, this is not what is meant. That man, if he was upon the fitrah, if he believed in Allah, he believed in the Prophet ﷺ in his heart, okay, but he did not proclaim that faith, that iman is acceptable. But if he proclaimed it, then what would that cause? What would that create? Problems for him. And this teaches us a very important lesson, that living in this day and age, if ever we find ourselves in a situation where presenting our religion or talking openly about it is going to create problems for us, then what is best? Keep religion a private matter. A private matter. Recently somebody came up to me and said that in school, a certain group of students, they talk very openly about homosexuality and how it should be okay. And she says that when I sit in that gathering, I feel very uncomfortable because I feel like I should stand up against them. But at the same time, I feel like if I do that, nobody's going to hear me. And whatever good that I can bring in right now, even that will stop. Even that will stop. So what should I do? This is what we need to do in a situation like this. Keep the religion a private affair. That doesn't mean forever. Because we will see that for 3 years the Prophet ﷺ was like this. After 3 years, then he went public with the da'wah. And that is inshallah what we will learn in our next lesson. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.